Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on this Thursday, April the 28th, which normally in Broncos country is a bit of a celebration. It is the first night of the NFL draft. But because of the Russell Wilson trade, the Broncos do not have a first-round draft pick this year, which likely, barring some unexpected trade, makes tonight's a bit more maybe on the boring side, but still plenty to get into. The Broncos still do have 9 draft picks, most of those, all of those on days 2 and 3. And for a bit more on what the Broncos might do, we've got our 90s Broncos Insider Mike Klis joining us here today. And Mike, we were just talking about this a second ago, a rare-ish Thursday or first night of the NFL draft with maybe a bit of a calmer outlook for the Broncos.
Yeah, and it was a rare trade a month ago for Russell Wilson. You got a franchise quarterback. They say no pain, no gain. And this is the pain part where they don't have a first round and they don't have that early second round. Von Miller got him picks in the second and third round, but the Rams did him no favors winning the Super Bowl because now that means those picks were the last pick in the second round and the last pick in the third round. 64 and 96 is what they got back for Von Miller. So almost a third and a fourth versus a second and a third there. But, I think the Broncos, George Paton used a line. He stole it from Jeff Schneider of Seattle a few years ago, said, I'm going to watch Percy Harvin highlights after they made the trade for Percy Harvin. And that's what George said he's going to do. He's going to watch Russell Wilson highlights tonight. The Broncos won't go into the first round, barring, someone like the Jets saying, hey, you just want this pick, you can have it. Barring that, the Broncos don't have enough ammo to go from 64 to 32. They really don't have enough ammo to go from 64 to 40 in the second round. I think if someone like a Trey McBride, the fine tight end from Colorado State, and the Broncos have a big need at tight end, if he slides to 55, I think George will start getting antsy and start making some calls to see if he can get up to 55, 56, 57, 58. Try to, that's how it works while everyone's on the clock. See if he can get up there and maybe get a Trey McBride or a Nick Benito or Abraham Lucas, some of these guys that they have. They've probably got 10 guys they could take at 64. And most of those guys are going to be gone by 64. The one guy that slides that they have like a number 35 overall grade on, if he starts sliding, then that'll be the guy that whichever one starts sliding will be the guy they wind up taking at number 64. You got tight end as a need, and then the big 3 positions, left tackle, cornerback, and pass rusher. That's going to be where the Broncos are going to look. But it's and then next year you have to do this again, Chris. You'll be asking me the same thing next year. Broncos won't have the first and second round pick in 2023, so they've got to make do with this 64, 75, and 96 in the second and third round. They got to get 2 starters out of the 3, and then Russell Wilson has to be the franchise quarterback they think he is.
All right, I'm going to think a little positively from the Broncos' perspective here for just a second, because in George Paton's draft last year, it looked like the Broncos got some hits in the second and the third round with Javonte Williams, Baron Browning, looking like impact players. Of course, it's still early, but that's obviously been a point where the Broncos have missed in recent years. It's been those mid-round picks that have, aside from maybe say Justin Simmons, where the Broncos haven't done as well. What sorts of revamping has gone on in the front office there at Dove Valley to perhaps, other than George Paton, of course, I'm sure that's a big part of it, but what's gone on at Dove Valley to maybe start to see some better picks in those positions?
Yeah. And again, Javonte Williams he wound up being number 35 last year. The Broncos traded that pick away too this year. It's number 40. So it's going to be tough for him to find Javonte Williams at number 64 versus number 35 last year. You're right. George Paton won an award. He had the best draft. He won the award for best draft in 2021. And he won it not only because Surtain and Javonte were big hits in the first round and second, but also he traded back a couple times in the third round and wound up with Quinn Miners, who finished the season with 8 or 9 starts at right guard. He finished with Baron Browning, who started about 7-8 games at inside linebacker. By the way, Chris, everyone thinks the Broncos are taking an edge linebacker, an edge rusher, and they might. But Baron Browning was one of the surprises of minicamp. They moved him to the outside, from inside linebacker to outside, so his athleticism could be better utilized. And he looked really good in minicamp. He Jonas Griffith at inside linebacker, and then the advanced recovery of KJ Hamler from the injury he had last year. Those were the 3 biggest surprises of minicamp. And of course, it was great to see Russell Wilson chucking it around out there too. But so the edge rusher, they would like an edge rusher maybe at 64, but if they don't get one, the Broncos are gonna feel comfortable with where they are. They might like an inside linebacker, but with Jonas Griffith, along with Josie Jewell and Alex Singletary, who they signed in free agency, they're going to be comfortable with where they are. So those aren't really pressing. The only pressing one that I see is tight end. And as far as what they've done in personnel, George is just, he's more thorough with the tape. He's a scout. His background, see, Elway background was superstar quarterback when he became GM. George's background was scout, and he grinded. He watched tape, and he went out and saw all these players. He's used to seeing third-string guards. I said I've never seen anybody work the back end of the roster the way George Paton did last year throughout the season. Each week, he was picking up, there'd be an injury to a special teamer, and he would make a trade or claim a guy off waivers and fix that 46th, 47th guy on the game day roster. He cares about those guys. Those guys may not win you a game, but those guys, if they're not good, they could lose you a game. And so he really improved there. He's also very collaborative. He gets input from everyone. He wants to know what you think, Chris. He wants to know your opinion on what you would do. Now,
I'm not sure about that.
Well, he may not. He may hear your opinion and dismiss it, but he wants to hear it. And he's ultimately going to be the guy. He's ultimately going to be the guy. From what I understand, he tells everybody what he's thinking. He tells everybody. He wants everybody to give their opinions on every player, but then he's very close to the vest about the decision he's going to make. And so that's how it's going to be here for this draft with 64, 75, and 96 come Friday, not today.
Well, Mike, with a couple of those positions you mentioned of need, and it sounds like specifically tight end in your mind, how much do you expect the Broncos to value position of need versus best player available? I know over the years, the Broncos often said best player available was their mantra. How much has that changed, if at all, now?
Well, they all say that. And then they wind up saying best player at the position of need. The thing about tight end, Trey McBride is like the one second round tight end in this draft. He's got a chance to go late in the first. If not, he should go in the upper part of the second, within the top 15 picks of the second. So he's probably not going to be there for the Broncos. And if he's not, then the next best tight end you could probably get with that 96th pick in the third round, or one of the 2 picks. They got 115 and 116 back to back in the fourth round. They can get a tight end there. Now Georgia's going to move up and down the board. This is very fluid, very temporary, the picks he has. I anticipate him, first of all, maybe trading back a little bit with that 75th pick in the third round and picking up extra picks. He likes to throw darts. The more darts he can throw, he feels he has a better chance of coming away with more starters. And so, and this is supposed to be a strong draft. They're saying the A-listers, there's 15 to 20 A-listers. And then from 20 to like 50, it's a similar type guy. It's just like, what flavor do you like? So George feels okay about being at 64. I think he'd like to have a pick in the top 50. But, 64, 75, 96, 115, 116, that's not bad to have 5 picks that scrunched together there in the middle, because this is a deep draft. What happened with this draft, Chris, is they had it's the double COVID class. So guys got an extra redshirt year because of COVID. So guys are older, they're more polished, they're more ready to play. And that's why it's a deeper class. It's an older class than normal. There's a lot of 23-year-olds in this draft class. And so more mature, they are what they are. They're not, you want that 21-year-old stars like Javonte was, like Jerry Jeudy was, like Surtain was when they came out and they were first round and high second round guys. The 23-year-olds is where you get them starting in the late second on through the 5th round. So, if McBride is there at 55, the Broncos will try to go get him. Otherwise, I think they can stand. They can stand, and he probably won't be. Otherwise, I think they can stand pat and get, an offensive tackle, a cornerback. I think they like Roger McCreary of Auburn. One of those 3 big positions. There's actually 4 big positions, but they're not going quarterback. But the 3 are, offensive tackle, cornerback, and edge rusher.
I guess the final point about the draft that I kind of want to get your take on here is something that keeps coming to mind is thank goodness for the Von Miller trade, right? Otherwise, the Broncos would have basically no ammo here.
Yeah, and that's one reason why they gave up what they did with Russell Wilson, is knowing they had that ammo in reserve. I'm sure they wanted to give Seattle the Vaughn second-round pick rather than their own second-round pick. But for Russell Wilson, you had to give up the number 40 pick, not number 64. And so, and number 9. And so let's see. It'll be interesting to watch tonight what Seattle does with number 9, because that was the Broncos pick. It'll be interesting to see what they do with number 40 to lead off on Friday. But it was a steep price, and this draft, it's. Could you imagine, Chris? You wait to number 64 and you take a guard, Dylan Parham. I mean, that would be the most boring draft of all time. But but they like Dylan Parham, and he would be a nice pick. He would help the football team. It just, it's not going to move the needle too much here in Broncos country. Yeah. But you had enough excitement with Russell Wilson. Now it's time to kind of fill in, build some depth. Even get some starters for 2023. Because they've had to band-aid a few positions on the roster this year. They're still another year away from being a Super Bowl contender. They're a playoff contender this year. They want to be a Super Bowl contender realistically next year.
Speaking of which, maybe broadening things out a little bit, I guess the one bit of excitement, quote unquote, still is the ownership question. Where's that stand? Are we getting closer to finding the new Broncos owner? Yeah,
they, from what we understand, there are 5 or 6 finalists. They've got a nice structure together to buy, and it's either at $4 billion. We have source that said that Rob Walton of Walmart, or formerly of Walmart anyway, have put in a bid for $4.5 billion. I think it might go to $5 billion. Everyone's going to have to get up there to about $5 billion. I think it's going to be tight, but I think there's a chance it gets to $5 billion. And these prospective ownership groups are going to meet shortly in the next week or two at Dove Valley at Broncos headquarters, and tour the facility and meet with the administrative team, the vice presidents. I'm sure they'll stop by and ask George Paton about Russell Wilson. The new owner is going to have to probably pay a 5-year guaranteed contract for $250 million for Russell Wilson, by the way. Oh, by the way, you paid $5 billion, make that $5.25 billion to take care of Russell Wilson. So then they'll do the final bidding. They have a responsibility to the financial people, Steve Greenberg of Allen and Company and Joe Lascesi. They have a duty to the beneficiaries. This is a trust sale. So what that means is you can't take the second highest bidder. You've got to get the most money for the beneficiaries. You have a responsibility to the beneficiaries to get the most money possible. So it's going to be interesting. I think I would think that these people doing the transaction can get this thing to $5 billion. And Rob Walton, it seems like he's the favorite. Josh Harris, who owns the 76ers and the New Jersey Devils, and also a European Premier League soccer team. They all do, it seems like, anymore. They all have 4 sports, including one of the Premier League football club teams that they call it over there. And but there's some interesting names. And Todd Bowley is with the Dodgers and the Lakers and the NBA Sparks. So they've got some guys that are big hitters in the sports world too. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
So I guess as we kind of round things on out here tonight, boring, perhaps probably from the Broncos perspective, strictly from a Broncos perspective. Friday, Saturdays when things get interesting. And of course, then the summer with the ownership and of course, Russell Wilson's first training camp as a Broncos when things start to rev up, right, Mike?
That's right. And Chris, before we go, I just want to give, I'm on 9news.com. In about an hour, I'm going to post 9 possibilities for the Broncos at 64. Let me just go through the names I have here. Trey McBride, tight end from Colorado State. Roger McCreary, cornerback from Auburn. Dylan Parham, guard center from Memphis. Abe Lucas, offensive tackle from Washington State. Nick Bonito, edge rusher from Oklahoma. Drake Jackson, edge rusher from USC. Tyler Smith, offensive tackle from Tulsa. Martin Emerson, cornerback from Mississippi State. And then a couple of receivers would be Sky Moore from Western Michigan and Tyquan Thornton from Baylor. So I know the Broncos need a returner. From what I understand, there's not really a receiver who's worthy of a second-round pick who is also a returner. The returners are more in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round, premium free agents. So I don't think the Broncos are going receiver. They've got a good receiver group. The only question mark there is KJ Hamler's their speed guy, and he's coming off the ACL and other type of injuries that make him a little bit questionable, even if he did look good in his rehab. He's out there for minicamp already.
So go to 9news.com for that list, those 9 possibilities for the Broncos at number 64. Mike Klis, our Broncos insider, thank you so much. And by the way, enjoy, I don't want to jinx this for you, but what should be hopefully relatively low stress first night of the draft for you.
Oh, there you go. That's like in the 5th inning of a game at Coors Field. Boy, this game's really going fast. And the next thing you know, 18 relievers are in the game. But no, hopefully you're correct. We're all hoping that. You never know, though. You never know in the NFL. So we'll be out there at Dove Valley. We'll be live in the 4 and the 5. If we don't hear of anything, we'll maybe get more the comforts from my home studio for 9 and 10. We'll be live throughout the night, just discussing probably nothing of what happened in the draft and kind of advancing what they could do the next day.
Well, we do know if something happens that you'll be on top of it. So, Mike Klis, 9 News Broncos Insider, thanks so much for your time here today.
Thanks, Chris.